Welcome to Sound of Resistance channel. Sirens started to be heard in Ukraine. Clashes between the Ukrainian and Russian army flared up again. Russian leader Putin is attacking to try his luck on the battle area in Ukraine to play his last trump card. Ukrainian fighters are waiting for Russian soldiers who have taken a defensive position. Putin's last attempt to attack Ukrainian positions before winter falls in Ukraine. The Ukrainian army, quite ready for the attack of Russian soldiers, put their plans into practice to fend off the clashes that will take place in the line of fire. It is a matter of curiosity whether the possible attack of Russian army will break through the walls of Ukraine. While Russia is trying to avenge the lands lost in Ukraine from Zelensky army, Russia is busy pacifying the internal conflict. The withdrawal of Russian troops from the south of the country in Ukraine made Putin a target. In addition to his bad course in Ukraine, Russian leader Putin once again bowed Russia's head with the withdrawal of Russian troops from Kherson. After all the bad results, Putin could not sit comfortably in his chair. The Russian people are only angry at Putin. And he looks forward to the day when he will hand over the presidential seat. Of course, the anger and hatred towards Putin is not just a feeling felt by the Russian people. Kremlin allies feel that Putin should abdicate. So much so that the opposition in Kremlin has even started a petition to dismiss Russian leader Putin. Russian leader Putin also seems to be left alone with the war in Ukraine. There are many reasons for Putin's rapid fall from the top. Since February, together with his staff, Putin has been the most important figure in directing the war in Ukraine. The Russian leader had a hard time carrying the weight of the responsibility on him, and his misdirection and wrong decisions in Ukraine was the most important factor that reinforced the failure. Let's talk about Putin's wrong decisions in Ukraine and how it affected the direction of the war. After Putin started the invasion of Ukraine with abrupt decisions in February, it soon came to light that he had many shortcomings and unplanned invasion attempt. Russian President Putin made his first mistake by underestimating the Ukrainian army. Putin did as he planned to finish the preparations for the invasion of Ukraine in as little as 2 months. This caused the Russian army to gain momentum after 2 months in Ukraine. The Ukrainian army resolutely repelled the attacks of the Russian soldiers and then recaptured the areas occupied by the Russian army one by one. The Ukrainian army dealt a great blow to the Russian army during their offensive. About 80,000 Russian soldiers died in Ukraine after the attacks of the Ukrainian army. Russian leader Putin, in order to heal the wounds inflicted by the Ukrainian army, took a radical decision in Russia and announced a mobilization announcement that included the participation of Russian men in the Russian army in Ukraine. After the declaration mobilization announced by Putin, thousands of Russian men joined the Russian barracks in Ukraine, while thousands of them fled from the mobilization and left Russia. The biggest impact of the Russian people fleeing the mobilization was experienced in the Russian economy. With Russian men leaving the country, trade in Russia came to a standstill. Combined with the embargoes placed on Russia by its Ukraine allies, an economic crisis broke out in Russia. Sanctions in Russia hindered especially imports and exports and opened the door to an economic depression that affected the whole world. Russian leader Putin has to pay a heavy price for his wrong decisions in Ukraine. The collapse of the economy is not the only threat in Russia. Of course, Russia's notorious espionage program has also started to come to light with the recent developments. The spies that the Russian leader boasts are giving themselves away one by one. The Russian leader's eyes and ears on the world began to become dark. The developments that took place in the past days have upset the Russian leader Putin quite a lot. MI5 chief says Russian espionage in Europe has dealt a significant blow since Ukraine war. Russia's ability to spy on Europe has taken the most significant strategic blow in recent history. Following the coordinated expulsion of diplomats since the invasion of Ukraine and the rejection of 100 diplomatic visa requests in the UK alone in recent years. In an annual speech outlining threats to the UK, with 400 of whom he has determined to be spies, we continue to work hard to make the UK the most difficult operating environment possible for Russian covert actions, McCallum said. In the case of the UK, since we deported 23 Russian spies posing as diplomats, we have rejected more than 100 diplomatic visa applications on national security grounds. The serious point is that the UK needs to be prepared for Russian aggression in the years to come, said. In his statements after the speech, McCallum described the expulsion of Russian agents as a very big gap in the Russian call for a position in Europe, and added that data on Russian agents were shared among European allies, thus it is not easy for the Russians to cross-mail. What I hope will continue to be true is that if I manage to expose Russian agents, the vast amount of trained, experienced Russian intelligence talent will be far less useful and will last for years in many other parts of the world, said Ken McCallum, Director General of MI5 said. McCallum also referred to Iran in the speech. McCallum said it poses an increasing threat to foul play by the Iranian state, including aspirations to kidnap or kill British or UK residents. He explained that there have been 10 such potential threats in Ukraine since January alone. In his later comments, McCallum added that Iran was ready to act recklessly, describing them as a sophisticated threat. In addition to his speech, McCallum said they operated an Iranian agents, sometimes using their own operators, doing something with their own hands. And in other cases, they have commissioned other people to work on their behalf, said. McCallum said terrorism remains a persistent threat and that 8 potential deadly conspiracies were stopped last year. He assessed that 3/4 were related to Islamist extremism and 1/4 to far-right terrorism. McCallum added that the latter extremism is increasingly appealing to young Britons, with the youngest case I can remember is horribly, the person who potentially caused some threat was 13 years old. McCallum declined to give details during his speech. Among state actors, China poses the most game-changing strategic challenge for Britain. We are seeing Chinese officials play the long game in developing contacts to manipulate ideas in China's favor. We see not only prominent parliamentarians in the political landscape, but also people who are much easier in their careers in public life, he said. While the whole world turned its attention to Ukraine, the statements of MI5 General Manager Ken McCallum took its place on the agenda. And he gave a lot of information about what was going on in the world. He mentioned that the factors of the war still playing an active role not only in Ukraine but all over the world. Thank you for watching us.